Hello and welcome to episode 4 of the Bowman Color Team Sets, where we take a look at the collection of players from each team featured in the 1953 set and see what they were up to during the 1953 season. Today we're going to take a look at the lowly and often overlooked St. Louis Browns, who reached the end of the line in 1953. But before we get into that, let's have a look at the cards themselves. Okay, so we're going to start in order with the second card in the set, Veeck, of course very famous for hitting what became the catch made by Willie Mays in the World Series. Next up is definitely one of my favorite cards in the whole set, Don Lenhart. Fantastic nighttime shot. You can see the stadium lights on in the background. Just super cool. Okay, Marty Marion, one of many portrait shots that the St. Louis Browns have in this set. You can see the little alien patch on his shoulder there. Next up, Bob CAIN. Really difficult card to track down, hard to find centered. This guy's got quite an attitude, Clint Courtney. Also kind of looks like George from Seinfeld. Courtney used to get into all kinds of scuffles with players, especially Billy Martin. Here's Jim Dyke. Interesting angle chosen by the photographer. Another portrait, Marlin Stewart. You can tell the photographer really just wanted to do portraits with the Browns. Kind of interesting when you see them in the context of the rest of the cards. And here's Dick Kryhoski, one of the coolest, I think, of the St. Louis Browns cards. And so there you have it, the complete team set of the St. Louis Browns for the 1953 Bowman Color set. Okay, so it's impossible to talk about the fall and demise of the St. Louis Browns without talking about their owner, Bill Veeck. Veeck is widely known for being a controversial innovator and promoter of the game, having worked with the Cleveland Indians and the Chicago White Sox. When Veeck bought the lowly Browns in July of 1951, it was widely predicted that he would move the franchise, but he insisted that he planned to run the Cardinals out of town. His plans were to win over the hometown crowd with new ideas and promotions to try to breathe new life into the floundering franchise. On his first night as owner, Veeck served a free beer or soda to everybody in the ballpark. 6 weeks later, 3-foot 7-inch Eddie Gaedel stepped to the plate. With perhaps the tiniest strike zone ever, Veeck allegedly threatened to shoot Gaedel if he swung at any pitch, preferring instead to let the crowd soak in the sight with 4 straight pitches out of the strike zone to the tiny Gaedel. After his inevitable walk, Gaedel trotted to first, slapped the pinch runner on the back, and waved to the crowd on his way to the dugout, thus ending his very short career. The crowd that night was the largest the Browns had drawn in almost 4 years. The stunt worked. Only 5 days later, Veeck held perhaps his most innovative and most divisive stunt, the Grandstand Manager Night. An ad appeared in the St. Louis Globe-Democrat telling fans they could all manage the Browns for one game. All they had to do was submit contact information, a proposed starting lineup, and if they wanted to be an on-field manager, a letter of interest. Veeck sifted through 4,000 letters to select 2 people to manage the Browns for just one game. Clark Mitts and Charles Hughes were the 2 lucky fans. They sat alongside Browns manager Zach Taylor, who, instead of coaching, smoked a pipe with his feet up while others took charge of his team. So here's how the stunt worked. Each fan in the section received a sign with "Yes" printed on one side and "No" printed on the other. When either Mitz or Hughes determined that a decision was in order, they contacted Veeck's right-hand man, Bob Fischel, via walkie-talkie. Fischel would then raise a sign asking the fans a question, like whether a runner should steal, or if the infield should move back for a batter. And the fans would display their placards according to what they thought the team should do. A circuit judge estimated the votes to ensure fairness and then relayed the results to player coach John Berardino. As it turns out, the fans made a few inspired moves that actually changed the course of the game. First, they elected to keep Ned Garver, who at the time was pitching for the Browns, in the game, despite his 3-run first inning against the A's. He went on to pitch 8 scoreless innings after that and earned a complete game. The fans also elected to bring in Sherman Lawler, also with the Browns at the time, who was usually a backup catcher. Lawler went on to be the hero of the game, knocking in a couple of runs, including the go-ahead. On the other hand, the fans' decision to have Hank Arft steal second ended with him being out by 2 feet. In retrospect, probably not the best idea to announce a steal attempt into the stands. In the end, the Browns amazingly beat the A's 5-3. Though attendance had risen and would nearly double in 1952, many in the baseball community saw Veeck's actions as a mockery, stunts that were cheapening the game. At first, it looked as if Veeck's plan to run the Cardinals out of town might actually come true. The team was in financial trouble at the time and seemed as if a new town, Houston, might acquire them. But when August Busch Jr. of the Anheuser-Busch Brewery showed up to purchase the team, Veeck knew instantly that the Cardinals weren't going anywhere. He soon started looking for potential buyers and proposed a move to Baltimore, but the other owners would not let him migrate with the team. He had lost their favor with all of the stunts and radical proposals like sharing television revenue, so in 1953, the Browns teetered on the edge of total collapse. Okay, so we're going to look at some stats here. These stats are going to be low, and it's not surprising. I mean, the Browns are going to end up losing 100 games this season, so we're not going to see some really impressive numbers. So you can see that Vic Wertz was definitely contributing, 70 RBIs, 19 home runs. Unfortunately, that might be one of the best numbers they have on the whole team. All right, Jim Dyke, 27 RBI, 213 average. You're going to see a lot of numbers that you would expect from mid-range players on your team. Problem is that the Browns, that's all they had. And Courtney really adding a lot of flair to the team, but not much offense. Okay, so let's take a look at how the pitchers fared. First up is Marlin Stewart. He went 8-2 with a 3.94 ERA, so fairly respectable. Then we've got Bob CAIN, 4-10 with a 6.23 ERA. That's kind of the opposite end of the spectrum there. Now, many of you know that a really big name was part of the St. Louis Browns at this time, Satchel Paige, the man himself. Now, unfortunately, Paige didn't have a 53 Bowman color card, but just for the heck of it, here's what it might have looked like. We could only wish that this was for real. So, Satchel's stats that year, 3-9 with a 3.53 ERA. So, ERA is not terrible, but that win-loss is really painful, and that just goes to show you. The St. Louis Browns were having some difficulty that year putting some offensive numbers together. By the end of the 1953 season, Veeck's fate and the fate of the St. Louis Browns was virtually sealed. Veeck sold Sportsman's Park to the Cardinals and eventually sold the team to a Baltimore syndicate. So ultimately the owners got their revenge, while Veeck was hung in effigy in St. Louis by Browns fans. September 27th of 1953 was the St. Louis Browns' last game. Bill Veeck was not in attendance. Just over 3,000 fans showed up to what the Sporting News called a wake. The Browns faced Billy Pierce that day, who had 17 wins and a 2.80 ERA at the start of the game. Minnie Minoso drove in the go-ahead run in the 11th inning with a double, and the Browns lost to the Chicago White Sox 2-1 in 11 innings that day, giving the Browns exactly 100 losses for the year. Just how bad were the fortunes of the St. Louis Browns at that point in the season? Well, by the end of the 9th inning, going into extra innings, the plate umpire asked for more fresh baseballs and was informed that they had completely run out, so they were forced to use previously used baseballs to finish up the game. And thus ended the connection between the Browns and their hometown of St. Louis. After the season, the Browns moved to Baltimore to become the Orioles. If you're interested in learning more about the St. Louis Browns, I encourage you to watch the fantastic documentary, The St. Louis Browns, the Team That Baseball Forgot. I'll post the link below. Thanks so much for checking out the video, guys. Hope you enjoyed this look at the St. Louis Browns. Be sure to check out the other installments. There's a playlist below if you've missed some of them or you want to revisit them, and I'll be working on some new ones coming up soon. So until then, take care, and I'll talk to you all soon.